in this video, we're going to be focusing on multiplication and division of two functions. So some of this you may have already seen before in Algebra 1, and it's been a while. I'm going to reintroduce some concepts just very briefly. Some things we will spend a little bit more time on as we get into more lessons. So the first thing that I want you to note is that in our f function, that our highest degree here is a 2. And then there's a 1 degree and no degree. This makes this a quadratic. And again, I'm just kind of introducing some things that will go into more detail. And this here is just a linear equation. That's in the form of mx plus b. I'm going to write that like this so you can see this is like y equals mx plus b. So it's just a little bit of review. And notice that this has 3 terms and this has 2 terms. So right here, this is telling me to take my function f and multiply to my function g. So this little dot here means multiply. Okay. So if you remember from elementary school, when we multiplied, we got an area, or if for example, like if I did 3 times 4, I would have something like 3 units this way and 4 units this way, and this would be my example of 3 times 4, and I would get a total of 12. Well, we're going to do the same sort of thing here. There's more than one way to multiply, but I'm going to show you this way because we have so many terms. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write my quadratic, 3x squared minus 11x minus 4. That's my f function. And my g function, I'm going to write here, 3x plus 1. And the reason I'm doing this is because I'm creating a box to help me multiply, which is very similar to what we may have done in elementary school. So now I'm going to multiply my sides, the outside, to get the area of this box on the inside. So 3x squared times 3x gives me 9x cubed. Negative 11x squared times 3x gives me negative 33x squared. Negative 4 times 3x gives me negative 12x. So now I'm going to multiply this outside with 1. And anything multiplied by 1 keeps its identity. So this one's going to be easy because I'm multiplying all these by 1 to get the inside number. Okay, so we're not done. This is just a way to help me figure it out. And what I want to show you is that usually, but not always, on the diagonal are our like terms. So I finally call this the peanut of math. So I always look for the peanut of math. If these are not both x squares, I double check to make sure I did my math right. They're not always come out to be exactly the same. You've got to look at what you've got. So now I'm going to pull everything out of the box. So the first thing I see is 9x cubed. Now I'm going to combine these two. So negative 33x squared plus 3x squared gives me negative 30x squared. And negative 12x and negative 11x gives me negative 23x. And nothing is being added to the negative 4. So when I multiply function f to function g, this is my final answer. Okay, you have to pull it out of the box or you're not done. Now, the next one we're going to do is a little tricky. This one here is at function f divided by function g. So let's just write out what function f is. So function f is 3x squared minus 11x minus 4. And g of x is 3x plus 1. Okay. So what I want to caution you about is that this numerator is one number and this denominator is one number. So before we can actually go ahead and divide anything, we have to do what's called factor. So we have to factor the top and the bottom, and I'm just going to keep this short in the way that we can't factor that. It's linear, it's done. This is a quadratic. Quadratics we can usually factor. So I'm going to write factor quadratic. Okay, so sometimes I just like to have a little place where I work things out. So this is going to be my little work bubble. So I'm going to factor 3x squared minus 11x minus 4. So you may not remember how to factor, and that's okay. We'll be doing this a lot more extensively later on. I'm just going to give you a preview. So the first thing I'm going to do is I have another little way of figuring out how to break this down. I'm going to multiply my first and my last term. So that gives me negative 12x squared, and then I simply copy my middle term. What I'm looking for are these two terms because they will replace this. So my factors of negative 12x squared is going to be negative 12x and 1x. These two multiply to this, and these two add to this. So this is going to replace my negative 11x squared. So that gives me 3x squared minus 12x plus 1x, and then I'm going to copy down my last digit again. Don't feel overwhelmed. You don't have to know this right off. We will be doing a lot of practice with this. This is mostly Algebra 2 forever. We will be doing this. You'll have plenty of opportunity. So then what I do is I split this into two groups. I look for common factors. I can divide out a 3x from these two numbers. And when I divide out a 3x, if I divide this by 3x, I get x. If I divide this by 3x, I get negative 4. So over here I have to see what can I divide out of both. And at first it looks like there's nothing, but I can in fact multiply out a plus 1. So when I multiply out a plus 1, divide out a plus 1, when I divide this by 1 I get x, and when I divide this by 1 I get negative 4. So there's still one more step. I'm going to divide out these like terms, which is x minus 4. And when I divide those out, I'm left with 3x plus 1. So this is my factoring of this term. Again, this is just review and preview. So don't panic with this. This is just giving you the general idea. So that means my function f in factored form is 3x plus 1 times x minus 4, and my g is still 3x plus 1. Okay, so the last concept that you need to remember is that everything in parentheses is considered one number. This is one number, this is one number, this is one number. I just don't know what the number is because I don't know what x is. But if we look for things that are exactly the same, then that means they're the same number. So here I have 3x plus 1, and beneath it I have 3x plus 1. So that means 3x plus 1 divided by 3x plus 1 gives me 1. Notice I wrote the number 1 there. So that means this is the same as 1 times x minus 4. and 1 times x minus 4 is simply x minus 4. So that was a very involved problem, and I apologize for that, but it's one of these things that we're going to be getting into in Algebra 2, so don't freak out. We will eventually build there. I just want to let you know that that's where we're going, and that's a very vital skill that we will be working on in the next unit.